more specifically the chairperson of the Select Committee on Finance, who has indicated to me yesterday that he would not stay throughout because of other commitments. We will afford him the opportunity to make the remarks. I hope he has connected. We also wanted to welcome the officials of the National Treasury. I thought they were coming physically. Now I'm aware that they might be connected. As PA wanted us to be connected, I indicated that my part is clear. It wants me to be physical in the legislature. If I'm connected in Durban, and I would not make it at 2 o'clock in the House. So we want to welcome our friends from the National Treasury. They are my star, for the commitment they made on the Izinduna back pay in October, and then honoring that commitment. Oh, no, Wendy and your team, you are my stars. We also want to welcome our friends from the Provincial Treasury of KwaZulu-Natal, the no-nonsense team. That's what I like with the Treasury of KZN. They raise things as they are, irrespective of who the person is, but they raise it in line with the law. So Lizelle and your team, thank you very much. We also want to welcome the officials of our legislature, the secretary of our committee, Mr. Chile, and our own senior legal advisor, Ms. Benjamin, and other officials who might be connected. So colleagues would want to continue with our meeting. I checked with SPA as to whether our meeting is correct. The majority of our colleagues are connected virtually. And then I have also checked that our meeting is correct. Our agenda, colleagues, is as follows. We will allow our leader, Honorable Karim, to make the remarks. And thereafter, we will request the National Treasury to make a presentation on the division of revenue bill, and then we'll discuss that one. And thereafter, we'll go to the public hearing. We advertise the bill within the times that are expected. We are going to check if there are any inputs that we received, and also guys that might be connecting. So that's what it will be. Ourselves as the members of the Finance Portfolio Committee will be expected to confer the negotiating mandate on the bill, and thereafter check if we can adopt the reports on the bill. We anticipated how you preempted how you might think on the bill. And then those who are open as Democrats, we circulated it to all parties yesterday so that people go through it and check as to whether our report is in line with the rules of our legislature. So that's what we did. And then we'll also look at the KZN appropriation bill, which we think we'll vote on Friday. So that's what will be happening. So we have circulated the draft reports for the honorable members to comment on. So colleagues, I want to check if there's any honorable member who's moving for the adoption of this agenda for the record purposes. Mhlekazi, Honorable Rogers.
Happy to move for adoption. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mhlekazi. Any seconder, Ndabezitha Stulskandaba. Thank you very much. I see the hand of Honorable Governor and another hand that I can't see. Maybe they are covered or now they are lower. Thank you very much. There's another hand I can't see. Or CQ, your hand is up, my sister. Or you are covered, madam. Thank you very much. Can we continue with our agenda and invite our leader, a stalwart in Parliament, the former minister in the cabinet of South Africa, who is now the chairperson of this co-chairperson of the select committee in the NSOP on the financial matters, Honorable Y. Karim. Is my leader connected? Are you connected, Honorable Karim? It must be YC. Honorable Karim, we are giving you the opportunity for the remarks, my leader, so that we release you as per your request that you made yesterday. Honorable Karim, you are muted, my leader. Can you unmute your mic? Oh, no. We will allow him to make remarks whenever he comes. No, that's the why I don't like these virtual things. They frustrate me a lot. That's why I don't want to work from home until I put the telecom network, and I have no problem whatsoever. No, telecom, you must know, is a former government entity. Those who believe that government doesn't perform, telecom has got the best network. If I can tell you the secret, I'm no longer having a problem, Mhlekazi, when I'm at home, as I used to get cut off here time and again. Honorable Karim, I can see you, my leader. Can you use this opportunity to make your remarks?
Thank you, Chairperson. As I explained to you, unfortunately, I'm at the airport right now at Tambo on my way to China. You will be pleased to know, Chairperson, the taxpayer is not footing this bill. It's an SACP visit, so it doesn't affect the finances of the country. Unfortunately, I'll leave very shortly. I can only be here for about 20 minutes. So I thought instead of my inane comments, I'll pass, except to make the observation that some of the things the provincial legislature has been raising, both those that are unique to our province and those that overlap substantially with what other provinces say, are slowly but surely being met by Treasury, I think. And if you look at the allocations, as they'll specifically spell them out in a moment, with much better, precise and qualitatively better information, apart from quantitatively better information than I would offer you, I think that despite the overall sense people have of bleakness and of austerity, I really do think, it's my own view I offer, of course the majority in your committee will decide, Treasury is doing as best as it can under very, very difficult circumstances. Chairperson, and you just know now that the world global economy is going through a very trying times. Last week, the World Economic Forum repeated that the growth prospects for the global economy are very limited, that in fact there are people there who argue that there's a prospect of even a global recession. So these bleak times apply globally, but what is being noticed is that by very low margins, very low bar, very low standard as it were for terms of growth rates, our continent is doing slightly better than the advanced economies, as indeed are the developing countries. Southern Africa is lagging behind. And one of the issues that's arising globally, Chairperson, is that South Africa needs to do far more than we are doing to grow our economy. And we can look at the technical figures as we do now, but we have to look also at the politics, Chairperson. We have to get our politics right, both within the majority party as we're governing and ruling, and it's our job mainly to lead this country in view of the support base we have. But all other parties, whatever their differences with us, I think need to seek some degree of consensus around a growth path, Chairperson. Because we come back again and again to this. How do we disperse money if we're not growing the economy? And how do we grow the economy unless we all work towards some or other degree of consensus around the national development path? So I think that in future, when we look at the facts and figures, we also need to give some sort of broader perspective. The real issue that comes up again and again in the national parliament, as you know, whether it's to do with the fiscal framework, within which context, of course, we look at appropriations and the division of revenue or any other money bill, the issue remains. When are we going to get growth? How are we going to get there? And without that, what prospects have we got for delivering on our programs? But notwithstanding that, Chairperson, the task of us, both you here and us in the NCOP and those colleagues of us in the NA, we all need to do far more to ensure far more effective and efficient oversight to ensure that the limited money we do have is effected productively and it's value for money, as we keep saying. And moreover, now with the further allocation to local government, your responsibility, it seems to me, I can't prescribe, as a provincial committee, and ours is an NCOP. We're not an NA, we're an NCOP. We are meant to oversee the provinces and in particular also municipalities together with you. Our job is to ensure that the further allocations made to the provinces in this financial year are used as they should be. And of course, one good thing for now, for our province in particular, is the money that was required for the relief of the floods, disasters of last year, much of which is still being addressed and we have a long way to go, even though there has been some achievement. The money is now more available. So we need to actually ensure that the delivery occurs. So I think with those general, broader, if you like, political comments, some of which may gel with some of your members, Comrade Chair, some may not, but those are for what they were, my comments for now. I regret that because of complications with my ticket and my other difficulties here, I'll have to exit even sooner than I planned to. But obviously, I'll pick up what's in the meeting. And you're in a very good team here with Treasury, even if it doesn't mean that politicians will always agree with what they say. Thank you, Chairperson. If there's any specific question, which I don't think it seems to me is relevant at this stage, unless you hear what the Treasury officials have to say. But since I won't be here till the end, if you as a chair or anybody feels you want to ask a specific question to me, obviously, I'm happy to respond. But once again, I apologize for the circumstances.
Thank you very much, our leader. We wish you safe journey to the People's Republic of China. We hope that you are going to negotiate this like we did as the Finance Portfolio Committee when you undertook a study tour in that country. We negotiated with one of the provinces to make sure that they come to KZN and all the stuff, and they came based on the invitation that was made by the Finance Portfolio Committee. That is Guangzhou province that we visited in that part of the world. Thank you very much, Mr. Karim. Safe journey, my leader. Now we are inviting our leaders from the National Treasury to make a presentation on the 2023 Division of Revenue Bill. So we're handing over to you. Our leader, introduce your team. You are a star to us as the people of KwaZulu-Natal on that unfunded mandate that we have been fighting you over for a long, long time. Thank you very much. We're handing over to the National Treasury leadership.
Thank you so much. Most of you know me. I'm Wendy Fano from National Treasury in the Intergovernmental Relations Unit. And I'm accompanied by Emmanuel Pillay, that you also know very well, that will be taking you through the provincial allocations. And then we're also joined by Akka Young Modise, and I see Bhavesh Ravi is also joined, as well as Matapelo Papanjela has also joined. And so we're quite a big team from National Treasury. So if I can just ask someone from National Treasury, Emmanuel most probably, can we please flood the presentation that we can take you through? So we're a big team here today, and welcome everyone. Thanks, Emmanuel. If you can just go to the first slide, and this next slide, the presentation focus on the division of revenue for 2023, changes to the bill clauses and also the schedules. And then we'll also take you through the provincial government allocations. Emmanuel will take you through, and then the local government allocations, Akanang will take you through. Emmanuel, if you can just go to slide 2. Slide 3, thank you. Okay, what this slide indicates are the allocations that's going to national government, provincial government, and local government, and it indicates the increases made to the allocations over the MTF. And if you look at national allocations, and you can look at the most right-hand column, the allocations increased by 0.9%. If you look at the provincial allocations, it increases by 2.8%, and over the MTF growth on an annual basis, and then the local government allocations increased by 7.4%. So you can clearly see the growth rates in the provincial allocations and the local government allocations are much higher than to the national sphere. That does indicate there's a priority placed on the delivery of key services. Emmanuel will take you through the increases to the provincial allocations, and Akanang will take you through the increases made to the local government allocations. And what is important, the equitable share allocations generally grow faster than the conditional grant allocations in the local government sphere. On the provincial government side, it grows the other way. The conditional grant allocations grow faster. Next slide, please. We take the committee through this slide every year. On the left-hand sketch, you can see the allocations per capita to provinces. In the right-hand sketch, you can see the per household allocations to municipalities. And we present this every year, but what is important is that we know that Gauteng, for example, is an urban province. KwaZulu-Natal is a mixture of urban and rural, and Limpopo is most probably the most rural province. So if you, for example, compare the Gauteng allocations, where the majority of tax revenues are collected, you could see the bar is much lower than, for example, the bar to Limpopo, where there's much less tax collected, but there's high levels of poverty. So you could see that the formula really takes into account, the poverty indices of provinces. The same applies to metros. The local government equitable share formula acknowledged that metropolitan municipalities and secondary or intermediate cities have much larger capabilities to collect their own revenues, to fund their own operations. So, and it's not the case for rural municipalities. So if you look at the per household allocations for metros and intermediate cities, you could see the bar is much lower than that for rural municipalities, which is nearly twice more than that of the metropolitan municipalities and the intermediate cities. So it does show that the formulas are very much skewed towards the more poorer provinces and poorer municipalities. Next slide. What I'll do now is to take you through the changes to the actual bill clauses. We do a number of technical refinements like updating the years and things like that. So we don't focus on those technical changes. But what we do is we take the committee through the substantive changes to the bill is largely in policy in nature. And the first one, and it's linked to two sections in the bill. We all know that the local government equitable share, unlike the other allocations, have got prescribed dates on which the equitable share must be paid. We do know that we sometimes use the local government equitable share as a lever to instill good behavior in municipalities, such as getting funded budgets, converting from an unfunded budget to a funded budget, where the municipality can remain within its budget to pay, for example, large outstanding debts, such as those to Eskom, for example. So there's there are reasons why in certain cases the payment of the local government equitable share to certain municipalities are delayed. So this clause just enables that the date for those municipalities can be delayed. Then the section 7, the conditional allocations to provinces, and we did it in last year's Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. And that provision has always been there, or for a very long time has been there for local government, but not for provinces, that allows a province to pledge a conditional grant to undertake a loan. The advantage of that is that a province can fast track the delivery of infrastructure. It is subject to getting approval from the Loans Coordinating Committee. The Loans Coordinating Committee is chaired by the Minister of Finance and also represented by all the MECs for finance. And then they consider whether a loan will be approved to a province or not, and the conditions that's then attached to that loan, if any. So this is going to be the last time we're going to show this, because it's going to be a remaining feature in future Division of Revenue bills. Then it is not that a big change, but it's an important change in terms of Section 13. And in the past, what happened is infrastructure conditional grant allocation reports, the draft reports were submitted, but it was not the final reports were submitted. So, and it was just amended to include that the transferring officer and the relevant provincial treasury will also get the final report. So it's just to close the loop in that regard, and that more credible information is then available to do the analysis on quality spending, for example. Then in terms of Section 16, and this is quite a very important change, and it's to somewhat stop a naughty behavior that some departments have undertaken. So what they do is they don't spend their conditional grant allocations close to the end of the financial year. And I'm going to use an example of the Housing Development Agency, also known as HDA, where a province that is underspending on its housing grants then transfer it to the HDA, and then it's recorded as spending. And what is this process doing? It is just ensuring that those monies are then subjected. It must also be gazetted, and it can also, in the past, it was not subjected to the rollover process. In these instances, a request must be made for rollover, so it's subject to the rollover process. So if there's projects attached to it, a rollover will be approved. If there's no projects attached to it, the funds can revert back to the fiscus. So it is a way of ensuring that there's not fiscal dumping at the end of the financial year. Next slide, please. Okay, and I've already taken you through the local government equitable share. That is Section 22. But before I get there, go back to the next slide. The payment schedule that just links up to that previous paragraph to allow for the amounts to be changed as well. If I can then go to Section 18. Again, this is an important change, and I'm sure the KZN legislature will really like this change, because we do know what happens quite frequently is that a national department request for funds to be, just go back to the previous slide, funds to be, stopped to one province and transferred to another province due to underspending. Previous slide, Emmanuel, please. And what happens is, for example, KZN in the past have shown very good spending capability. So what happens very, very close to the end of the financial year in March, that the KZN province is then informed that they've got an additional allocation, and then everyone must jump to get adjusted legislation appropriation bill through the system before the end of the financial year. I remember one year, a lot of public holidays, and the KZN legislature just made that date, I think with a day or two, or on the day of the 31st of March. So that can be very problematic. So what we've now added are deadlines for national departments to make those requests, so that we give more ample time in future for the provinces to process that application. Similarly, there's also a deadline for local government, stopping and reallocation processes. So again, to give municipalities sufficient time to incorporate those additional allocations or reduced allocations for that matter in their budgets. And then the last one is amendment to section 31. What is important here, we do know that there's sometimes a bit over-eagerness to go to the court without using the necessary inter-governmental dispute mechanisms. So this is not a new clause. It's always been there. This clause has just been strengthened to ensure that there's proper consultation. The relevant provincial treasury must be informed, the Department of Cooperative Governance, the Auditor General, and to indicate to what extent they've then complied with those intergovernmental dispute mechanisms provided for in the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act. Next slide. And then this is quite one that's received quite a bit of attention in the Standing and Select Committees of Appropriations. In the past, we know we had 4 immediate disaster response grants, 2 on the budgets of the Department of Cooperative Governance and 2 on the Department of Human Settlements. So the grants on the Department of Cooperative Governance are still intact and they're still the same. But based on a request that from the Minister of Human Settlements, an amendment must wait to the immediate emergency housing response grants, both to provinces and to local government. To put that money directly on the budget of the National Department of Human Settlements. And the reasons given for that request was that, firstly, some provinces, when a emergency housing happens, the province or municipality unfortunately takes very long to respond. That was the first concern. The second concern was that sometimes there's a bit of overpricing in terms of the temporary residential units, and that the National Department of Human Settlements can procure it at cheaper rates. For that, that request was then agreed to by the Minister of Finance, and the change was made in the Division of Revenue Bill. So in future, what will happen is the money is still available. The municipalities and provinces will need to work through the National Department, indicate their needs, and then the National Department will then respond based on the request received by the provinces and the municipalities concerned. Can I then hand over to Emmanuel to deal with the provincial allocations? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Wendy. You have handed over to our leader, Mr. Pillay. Can you take us through, Mr. Pillay?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, honorable members of the committee and colleagues. Apologies for the slides. It seems to be skipping on its own. There might be an issue with my computer, but I'll try and keep it in terms of who's speaking. In terms of the provincial transfers, Wendy did give you an outline in terms of the total allocations, but this is the breakdown per province of the equitable share and conditional grants. You can see KZN receives the second largest amount on both the equitable share and conditional grants after Gauteng, 142 billion rand for the 23-24 financial year. Just to confirm that the growth rate in the equitable share on the provincial side is slightly lower than what the conditional grant growth rate is, 2.5% as opposed to 4.3%. Okay. They've also had some funds added, which I'll give you more detail on just now. But it was to respond to COE pressures, some projects for the budget facility for infrastructure, and also to address the damages incurred in the disasters, especially in April 2022. There's an amount unallocated at the bottom there for 146 million rand. That is the immediate disaster response grant. So it's unallocated for now. Once any disaster occurs in provinces and any application is made, then we will reallocate it to the appropriate province. So for now, it remains unallocated. The equitable share formula hasn't had any material changes in terms of the formula itself. There's still 6 components, but just to indicate that the data that we used for this new year is data that is new data, especially on the education infrastructure, the mid-year population estimates was used, as well as the information from the learner tracking system that the Department of Basic Education administers. The one substantial item here is the risk-adjusted element in the health component of the formula. But this was mentioned last year. It was updated. The risk-adjusted portion was updated, and it's been phased in from 2022-23. So it's in the second year in terms of the implementation of that. The other elements as well, we did use new data, especially basic and poverty, especially the mid-year population estimates data. In terms of the changes to provincial equitable share allocations, we did make some additions to all provinces for pressures that they're experiencing. So there were additions that we made for COE pressures in education. That was 20 billion rand over the MTF. For the health sector, it was COE and other related services as well, such as lab services, medicines, and medical supplies. So there was a 23.5 billion added there. And there's also funding for the COE carried through cross for the 22-23 wage agreement. And that's 31 billion rand. And Chair, as you mentioned earlier, the 631 billion that's added to KZN for the Izinduna backlog there. So of these amounts, with the exception of the Izinduna, KZN receives 4.7 billion, 5 billion, and 5.3 billion for these 3 years of the MTF for all the pressures that I mentioned. There was some funding available from the budget facility for infrastructure for the Kucha special economic zone, and that will flow over 3 years through the equitable share. There's 1.8 billion rand available. Some additions were also made to conditional grants to provinces, which Provincial Department of Education and Transport administers. So we added funds to the Early Childhood Development Grant, the School Nutrition Program, and the Education Infrastructure Grant as well. There. And then there was some funding as well available to address the disasters that happened in 2022 in April. Okay, so with the disasters allocations, we added on 3 sectors, and I'll give you the detail just now. But for education is 300 million rand, and I'll show you towards the end of the provincial part of it how much exactly for which particular disaster was allocated for 23-24 financial year. In transport, we did add 6.8 billion rand for the maintenance, the PRMG, the road maintenance grant backlog, the refurbishment of provincial roads, and there was funding available for the building of modular and steel bridges in rural areas, rural bridges. That funding is made available through the budget facility for infrastructure. With regard to the disaster and the roads damaged by by the floods, there's 307 million rand available, and that is pertains to the disaster damages that were caused in the April 22 flood. Agriculture. So the Department of Agriculture in the province did make a request to the budget facility for infrastructure for the funding of agri-hubs in the province. So it's quite a number of hubs, such as red meat, white meat, and vegetables, among others. So over the MTF, there's 153 million rand available for this. This is part of the initial planning and to initiate the project, not as such to construct or to implement as such, but this allocation is just for that. The projects are normally that's normally funded from the budget facility for infrastructure is normally mega projects, so in excess of 1 billion rand. So ultimately, depending on the progress that they make and the reports that they submit to the BFI, will depend on that if further funding is available and when it will be made to the province. So we did in terms of health, we rescheduled an allocation for the Limpopo Central Hospital. So we're just moving it out of the current year and adding it into the ensuing years of the MTF. Wendy mentioned the one about the housing emergency grant that's moved the vote of the Department of Human Settlements. So at the time of tabling of the budget, this measles outbreak that I'm sure you must have read about in the media and also as communicated by the Department of Health, was not sort of in the headline at that time, or was not taken into account when we tabled the 2023 budget with which the Division of Revenue is tabled. And as such, the frameworks that the Department of Health administers did not take that into account. But now it's imperative that it's taken into account. There is discussions with the Department of Health in terms of how we're going to factor this into the frameworks for the current year. But since it's already tabled with Parliament, we'll need to request Parliament that we sort of tweak the frameworks to allow for provinces to respond to the measles outbreak. But it's still ongoing, and we will keep you informed of the developments on that one. So this is just a confirmation of the allocations made to the province. You can see there's 115 billion rand for equitable share and just over 26 billion rand available for the conditional grants. And there's a list of conditional grants. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but you can see there's quite sizable allocations made. For example, in education gets 5.3 billion rand in the first year of the MTF, and health gets just over 11 billion, human settlements just under 4 billion, and transport gets 4.7 billion. And just to the last part of the slide at the bottom will give you an idea of what, in terms of the disaster, which disaster the funding is available for. If, for example, you'll see in education, there's two amounts there. One pertains to the 2019 disaster, and the other one pertains to the 2022 disaster. So those three sectors, education, human settlements, and transport, there's just over 1.5 billion rand that's being allocated in the current financial year to address the damages brought about by the disasters in 2019 and 2022. Yeah, that's all from me, Chair. I'll hand over to my colleague from local government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we invite the presenter on local government allocations?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. My name is Aganya Modise. I'll be taking you through the local government allocations. Next slide, please. So this slide talks to the local government transfers across the 2023 medium-term expenditure framework. As the honourable members may know, the local government accounts for 10% of the revenue that's raised nationally, as most municipalities have revenue-raising powers. And then overall, in terms of the 5B or direct allocations to municipalities, they show an average annual growth of 5.9% over the MTEF, with a total allocation of 163.9 billion, as shown on the table on the right, in the 2023 financial year. And then in terms of the local government equitable share, the annual growth is averaging at 8.1% over the MTEF, with an allocation of 88.9 billion. I think I'm right. Yes. Or rather, the equitable share and related is 96.5 billion in the 2023 financial year. And when we look at the general fuel levy, it has an allocation of 15.4 billion in the 2023 financial year and 16 billion respectively in the 2 outer years. And lastly, the conditional grants, which would include the infrastructure and capacity grants, have also been increased with an amount of 51.9 billion and continues to increase over the MTEF period. Next slide, please. Okay, so honourable members, this slide talks to the updates of the equitable share formula across all municipalities, which includes updates mainly to the data of household growth. This is in terms of the 2021 Stats SA numbers, which mainly consists of the increase of an average of 8.9% of the water board bulk price. And secondly, the increase in bulk electricity of 20.7% as approved in the multi-year price determination. And then a projection of the cost price index. This is to account for other costs. It's important for honourable members to also note that the formula is fully funded to account for household growth, and it increases with a total of 8.1 billion, as seen on the right-hand side. These consist of free basic services with an amount of 70.9 billion, the institutional, which is 6.7 billion to account for administrative costs, and lastly, the community service, which contributes a total of 10 billion. And then further, 1 billion has been added or allocated in the 2023 financial year in order to subsidize the remuneration of councillors. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide talks to the amendments done across local government for conditional grants. The first being the equitable share. As previously mentioned, it was increased to fund free basic service with 2.5 billion, 2.3 billion, and 3.3 billion over the next 3 financial years. The PTNG or Public Transport Network Grant is allocated 8 billion in 2024-25 and a further 13 billion in the following year to fund for the single integrated ticketing system. And then thirdly, similarly to the provincial disaster grant, the MEHG or Municipal Emergency Housing Grant has been discontinued. However, the grant is still kept under the vote of DHS for disaster management. And then further, in dealing with the current electricity crisis, new reforms have been formed under the INEP grant. This is both the 5B and ESCOM, starting in the 2023-24 financial year in order to fund for alternative energy sources. Next slide, sorry. Okay, these are more changes to municipal allocations. The first two bullets would relate to the last slide in terms of the reforms for the energy crisis. And then there's a rescheduling of the budget facility for infrastructure across various grants, in that an amount of 461 million is allocated towards the PTNG, towards the My City project in the city of Cape Town. And secondly, under the RB grant, or the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant, this has been reduced with 136 million in 2023, and additional 1.4 million is allocated in the following year for George in order to assist with the municipality's water security and remedial works project. Next slide. Okay, so we're still with the BFI in terms of the new allocations. These are made across metros and immediate cities. And in KZN in particular, the eThekwini Metro is allocated 88 million in 2023. And a further 118 million in 2024-25. This is in order to implement the phase 1 of a Voca node project, and the rest of the BFI funds are allocated across in other municipalities like City of Johannesburg, so Blackie, Drakenstein, and Nelson Mandela Bay. This is in order to assist with the various infrastructure-related issues. Next slide. Okay, this slide basically depicts the increase of equitable share across KZN municipalities over the 2023 MTEF and the upward adjustments in the outer years. Next slide. It's a continuation of the last slide. Next slide. So overall, KZN municipalities are allocated a total of 18.6 billion in equitable share allocation in the 2023-24 financial year, 20 billion and 20.9 billion for the 2 outer years. Next slide. This slide shows the total allocations in KZN, which is 11.6 billion in 2023 financial year, of which the infrastructure transfers of 11.1 billion consists of direct conditional grants, which would amount to 10.1 billion. And then with the largest allocation being the municipal infrastructure grant with 3.9 billion. And then the indirect transfers are allocated an amount of 1 billion in the 2023 financial year. And then lastly, in terms of the capacity building conditional grants, it is allocated a total of 445.3 million. Next slide. Okay, so this table shows the conditional grant expenditure for the province over the 3 financial year in terms of the Section 71 publication. We see here the total allocation, the outcome or the total transferred amount, as well as the expenditure incurred against each grant, of which in the 2019-20 financial year, we see an overall expenditure of 74.1% at the bottom there. And then the next year, 2020-21, there's an improved performance of 80.6%. And the following year, in 2021-22, there's another improvement with 83.1%. Next slide. Okay, that's all from my side. So the honorable members can see the link provided on, this is on Treasury's website in order to find the revenue bill and the detailed changes thereof. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just wanted to check if the two other colleagues of ours, there's anything that they feel needs to be added before we engage on the presentation. It's a very, very clear presentation to me. Chief Director, is there anything that you would want to add overall?
Thank you. No, there's nothing more to add. Thanks.
Honorable members, this is your opportunity to pose questions for clarity on this presentation. Mhlekazi, you are number 1. Makeba, you are number 2. Any other member on the virtual platform? I can't see. Please shout on the virtual platform because I'm still prevented by the slide that is still on there. Otherwise, I can't see whose hand is. Oh, Honorable Governor, yes, thank you very much. So you will be number 3, my lady. We want to start with Honorable Rochas and Mhlekazomhle.
Chair, I've got 2 simple questions, and the one is around the 631 million rand for the compensation of Izinduna. Now, obviously, we welcome this, but what I want to understand is that 631 million covering the back pay that had been recalculated. Because my understanding is the province has been funding the unfunded mandate of monthly remuneration of Izinduna since 2017. There was a bit of confusion in the debate yesterday when I raised this. So I want to understand, is National Treasury now funding the annual budget for Izinduna's salaries? Or is the province of KwaZulu-Natal still funding that and the back pay is taken care of? So hopefully someone can give me some clarity there. Then, Chair, on the presentation on slide 12, they're talking about responding to existing spending pressures. 20 billion over the MTF is added to COE pressures. Now, I'm assuming that's a globular amount, a national amount, and that's not a provincial amount. If I'm correct in my assumption there, then what is the allocation to the province of KwaZulu-Natal on those particular line items? Because you get to a point where it talks about province specific on the same slide, page 12, that 631 goes to KZN. So I'd like to understand if those recalculations and reallocations are KZN based. Thanks, Chair.
No, Chairperson, greetings to members of the National Treasury, President, and also the Provincial Treasury. No, Chairperson, I've got just 2 warring questions, especially in terms of the grants. When I look at our province, it's been affected mainly by the disasters. And when you check to the grant for transport in terms of road maintenance, in comparison with other provinces, I don't think it's enough. That I don't know how did they reach to 307 million. I thought maybe to be more than 500 million for the province, since it's been affected by the disasters, but they're subject to correction. Maybe how did they reach to that little amount? And also the last one, I don't see the additional grants for KwaZulu-Natal province health grant. Hence, there are 2 grants which has been reduced, which were integrated and been reduced for APWP grants. I'm not sure maybe it's me that is not getting it right. But I need that clarity, Chairperson, so that sizohambisana kahle. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Governor.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, I want to raise two issues. I can see the distribution in terms of the ECD, etc. But what I wanted to find out is one of the big pressures for health is compensation of employees to the extent that they're unable to take in, newly qualified medical practitioners, etc. They've reduced the numbers and staggered it, etc., and received very unfavorable press in that regard. They've also kind of like frozen employment. But unless I'm missing it, I'm not seeing any addition to health COE budget. I can see the one for education and it's appreciated, but I don't see it for health. To get any feedback on that. And then in terms of the Department of Public Works, they get an allocation for property rates, right? Which was reduced. Now, what is the situation there? Because I don't see the allocation for public works in terms of the rates. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Now, before the National Treasury, is there any hand? No, it's no longer on. Want to start by making the National Treasury understands what we are facing. We are very fortunate that by the 28th of March, as the Finance Portfolio Committee of KwaZulu-Natal, we concluded the scrutiny of the budgets. We want the National Treasury to understand that we discovered that there are serious problems around the social departments, which is education, which can't fund more than 6,000 posts. Then we also discovered it, as other colleagues of mine, in the Department of Health, and a new development in the Department of Social Development. So we wanted that to be understood. And we committed ourselves that we are going to raise this thing because there are serious pressures. And most of these pressures in all three departments are on COE. As we have indicated, I just remembered the number of posts that are not funded currently in education is more than 6,000. I can't remember the exact number, but I'm sure that it is more than 6,000. The question that I have in that regard is whether the National Treasury would consider addressing these pressures on COE in these three departments during the midterm budget adjustment. I wanted that first question. The second question is what is on the 631, which we really appreciated very much. We want to repeat this for record, Wendy. When we posed that question in October, when you were preparing for the budget review at a national level, you indicated that, and you were very confident that you are going to make sure that this pay for Izinduna is going to be included in the 23. You know, we have been fighting battle at all levels since 2013. As the Honorable Rogers is indicating, is an unfunded mandate. Provincial Northman Presidential Proclamation of 2013. That's why we are owing Izinduna, because we started paying them in 2016. And then we are owing them from 2013 to 2016. Then the calculation came to that. But the question is, the proclamation was made by you at the national level. And we have been paying izinduna from 2016 to date. And I hope you are going to answer the question of Honorable Rogers, because it's worrying me. But I don't want to water down to say we really feel very proud to engage with you, Wendy and the team, because whatever commitment that you have made, you will make sure that you honor them. That's the question that I want. I want to move to slide number 14. No, this thing worries me very much. That human settlements, a conditional grant, which is going to be part of the national. I want to find out as to whether it is going to be in the form of indirect grant. You know why I'm asking that question? It's still the position that I've been holding, which was first exposed by FFC many, many years ago, that these so-called indirect grants are poorly performing because of problems of monitoring on the part of national departments. Now, because we are going to be taking this money and then centralize it at a national level, how sure are we that if it is in the form of indirect grant, it is going to be spent accordingly, so that this problem of poor performance by indirect grants are normal? Then there's another thing that we once posed, and then we left it during the 5th Parliament. We were told by the national government that you were working through the Department of Transport to institute what you called the national and the uniform national number plate system, which will deal with these disparities in terms of motor car licensing. Do you have any information around it? Or maybe we are going to hope that the Department of Transport, the Portfolio Committee on Transport, is going to check that one. And another thing that I needed to be clarified on is on slide number 21 on local government. During the budget speech by the National Minister of Finance in this country, spoke clearly on the so-called the rooftop solar panels. Is there any clear direction as to how people are going to get the rebate in relation to that one? Because we as public representatives are confronted about that when we are working with the people on the ground, but we can't provide any answer. I just wanted to find out. Someone is trying to intimidate me. I wanted to find out as to whether you do have information on the clarification. We don't want this thing where it is perceived that politicians make empty promises. When they confront an old man like me, and I am found to be having no information, it becomes very problematic, and people say, deploy old men to the legislatures, and old men don't provide the practical answers. If you could clarify me on that one, I would be very happy. Those are the questions. No. I had my solar system more than 3 years ago. You know it. I was posting to you. I'm not standing to benefit out of this, but the people who voted for me stand to benefit. Wendy and your team, if you could assist us on this.
Thank you so much. And there's quite a few questions today and quite a few very difficult ones. We'll see how we can deal with that. With regard to the Iziduna allocation of 631 million It's just for the arrears. It is not for the continued funding of that. It's just to assist the province with the arrear with regard to the Insaduna. Going forward, the province is responsible to budget for those expenditures. If there's any further requests in this regard, it must come through the formal budget process. And it is not just the issue that impacts on KZN. Keep in mind, this arrear amount is just paid to KZN and not to the other provinces. The other provinces have already made sufficient provision for those costs in their budgetary processes. It's most probably this is going to open up further requests. So if we want to consider any amendment to that, like I indicated, needs to come through the formal budget process. The provinces need to raise it with the National Department of Traditional Affairs that is responsible for that, and the National Department of Traditional Affairs need to put in a submissions through the national budget process. Otherwise, it cannot be considered. So it is partially assisting the province, but not fully. So we're quite open and frank about that. Then with regard to the allocations that's given for COE, that's part of the provincial equitable share, it is actually quite difficult to indicate what the exact amount is. The reason why I say that is those amounts run through the provincial equitable share formula. So what you can see is how the provincial equitable share, what it was last year, and how it's increased to this year. But if you want an exact amount of how much that 20 billion for COE goes to KZN, we will not be able to give an exact amount. So you need to look at all those additions and then look at to compare to what the equitable share was last year, and then see at the percentage increase to get an idea of how much of that money goes to the KZN province. Can I then ask Emmanuel to deal with the other provincial questions posed on the grants, the consolidations, the health, and the property rates one? And then with regard to the budget process, that there's pressure on the budgets in KZN. Similarly, it can be said there's a lot of pressure in other provincial departments as well, and municipal departments as well as the national department. So unfortunately, what is required frequently in these cases is that we focus on living within our means. I know it's not a nice thing to say, and trying to balance the budgets in terms of the priorities and focusing really on key delivery areas. With regard to the adjustments budget, and we did not mention it in this presentation because it's not factored into the Division of Revenue Bill, but it is an important issue to note, is that we all know that government employees just recently got an increase. And that also must still be factored into the budget process. I cannot make any promises or commitments at that stage, but we'll definitely give more information on how we deal with that COE issue during the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill process. So that is a key issue. The answers on, and the reason why I'm not answering is because the answers are not yet known. There is a committee that's been set up between National Treasury with the provincial treasuries, what we call the COE working group, that will be looking at these issues and see to what extent can it be done through reprioritizations and the like, and what the potential solutions are in that regard. And some of the solutions, unfortunately, can require that if a person vacates a position, for example, that that position not be filled, particularly if it's not a critical post. Other solutions, for example, is looking at entities. There's provincial entities as well, and the like. But we are currently working on those. Answers are not yet cast in stone. We are still working on the options and the potential solutions. So we can give more information as that become available. With regard to the Insaduna, the unfunded mandate, I already responded to that one. Then with regard to the Human Settlements Emergency Grant, the National Department of Human Settlements have assured us that they're building internal capacity to basically deal with this issue, and they've given us the assurance that they'll be able to spend. We all know the proof is in the pudding, however, so we'll see if an emergency housing disaster happens, whether the response rates are quicker, and whether the cost savings are achieved. So let's say that this issue will also be monitored and see how things progress. But one thing that we've learned, and it's true with regard both to direct as well as indirect grants, the moment you create a new grant, often the spending capacity takes quite long to be established. For example, we saw when the education, the schools backlog infrastructure grant was created, that is an indirect grant administered by the National Department of Basic Education. In the first few years, we did not really see very good performance, but as time went on, actually the performance increased quite a bit. And what we do see in some of the indirect grants, because we can also point out the negatives, but we should also point out the positives. The building solutions are better and cheaper in a lot of cases, and so the schools that's built are built cheaper, and it's most probably going to be more long lasting. So there are benefits in national departments running these programs as well. So it is sometimes quite a difficult decision to make. When do you close an indirect grant? For example, the decision to incorporate in the future's MTFs. It wasn't this year, but in the next year and the following year, the intention was to incorporate the school backlog infrastructure grant in the education infrastructure grant. And based on the request of the the Minister of Basic Education in Cabinet, that decision was also delayed. So the grant will also be continuing for a longer period. So this is just for the committee to note as well. And then with regard to the uniform number plate system, sorry, I can't respond to that one off. It will be best if what we can do from our side, and when the information becomes available, but I don't think we'll get a response where we can just give it quick. We can ask colleagues in National Treasury to take it up with the National Department of Transport, and then as soon as we get a response, we can give it through to the committee. And then with regard to the rooftop solar and how the subsidies will work, again, the details will be made available on the National Treasury website, and most probably as the information becomes available, we can share it with the committee. But it's correct to say that if you've already put in solar, that benefit is it's not back payable. It is from the date when it will be implemented in fact. Yep, and it is also not going to be forever, most probably. So there will also be a deadline. Yep, so that type of information is very critical and important to know. So if I can then with regard to I'm talking now about the households and the businesses, but then if I can ask someone on the local government team just to take the committee through what we've done in the conditional grant system to also enable solar to poor households as well. So Emmanuel first, and I don't know who wants to take the local government question. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Chairperson. So the questions on the roads disaster funding as well as the EPWP, I'll start with that. So in terms of disasters, there's a whole process that needs to be followed to request for funding for disasters. So there's two grants. One is the immediate disaster relief grant, which I mentioned earlier, and then there's a post-disaster recovery grant. Now the post-disaster recovery grant is usually the one that is requested for infrastructure and long-term repairs. So after the disaster is declared, then the provincial department whichever department it is, will make a request via its provincial disaster management center. So what they will do, they'll assess the number of roads damaged, for example. They'll assess what the cost of those damages are and what it will cost to repair. And they will submit this whole assessment to the PDMC, who will then submit it to the National Disaster Management Center. So the National Disaster Management Center on their side will also do their own verifications to say whether the cost estimated to repair are in line with what their assessment is. So most probably what happened was the honourable member asked why was the allocations less? He expected it to be a bit more. So it could be that the verifications done by the NDMC was only to the value of 300 million rand, and that's what the funding was available, and that request was made to the National Treasury, and that's what we funded. So it depends on what the whole assessment was and what the verification process, the outcome of the verification process was. The EPWP grants. Now this grant, we did receive a request which we replied to the Provincial Treasury, where I think it was a social sector EPWP grant had an issue with the allocation being reduced. Now remember, this grant is based on incentives. So the more you perform or the more you add in terms of your contribution, then the more you'll be compensated for it. So when we had a look at the performance indicators, over the historic performance indicators, it actually declined. I can make the details available to you, perhaps after the meeting, where you can see the sort of objectives or the outputs had declined, and subsequently the allocation for the ensuing years had to decline because it's based on historic outputs and additions that the province makes. Honorable Governor, in terms of the public works to the department, there is funds available